In this video we're going to look at triggering graphics across different keyer layers. So first of all I'm going to set up a page with a graphic. Here's my cube. I set an animation, put a rotation in there as well. Next frame I'm going to rotate it, auto keyframe on. And this is just so we know that it's actually done its move. And then we'll just do a position move. And then at the beginning we're going to put in a pause marker. And this pause marker, name trigger, edit this. And it can be a page name trigger, it doesn't have to be a global trigger. So I'm going to call this one box move. Copy that and click OK. Now sometimes it's easier doing this with a global trigger. I'm just using it as a page name trigger and you'll see why in a few minutes. That's the first page done. That's a page waiting for a trigger. My second page, I'm actually going to send the trigger. Object, it's going to animate this down. I'm going to make this down over about half a second. And when this gets down to the bottom, what I'm going to do is I'm going to send my trigger. So my timeline 1, I'm going to add a trigger track. And when it gets to the bottom, it's going to send a named trigger event. At the moment, there aren't any named triggers in there. If I had to put a global trigger on the page before, it would have come up in the list. Click Edit, Add, and that's box move. That's going to fire off my box move trigger when it gets down to the bottom. And one last thing I'm going to do in my box. So I'm just going to stick a material on the one side so that I can see that it's actually rotated around. So there's my first frame, second frame it switches, then it slides across. Okay, so my first page is waiting for a trigger. My second page is going to send the trigger. I'm going to take my first page on layer 1, keyer layer 1, and take that to air. There you can see my box just waiting there. Take my second page to keyer 2, and when I play that, the ball comes down. When it gets to the bottom, it fires the trigger. A trigger, all it's doing is one page has a trigger track, and that shouts a trigger command, and it just shouts this string, this word here, whatever the word you want it to be. Here I've used the word box move, and it shouts that loudly. And our keyers have been set up so that we can fire triggers from one keyer to another. On my first page, the timeline was set up to wait for that trigger word. Now, part of the configuration, I've actually grouped these two keyer layers together with a string or word called tgroup, but that's different from the triggers that I'm using on my timelines. It's just a word that ties these two keyers together, and that's all there is to it. You have one page that sits and listens for a trigger word, and another page that sends a trigger word. And that's how cross-layer triggering works.